Today, I'm joined by Simon Harris, outspoken critic of Islam and author of Catalonia Is Not Spain, a historical perspective. Now, Simon, how are you today?
I'm not bad, Ben. Well, in fact, I'm very well. That's probably a better way to describe it.
Good stuff. Glad to hear it. Now, I think the best place is to start with your book. Now, first of all, when did you write it?
That was 2014. This is actually my second book on Catalonia. The first one was written in 2007, which is going native in Catalonia, which is all about kind of my adaptation of the Catalan identity. And then Catalonia Is Not Spain was 2014, just before the last proxy referendum.
Yeah.
And it's basically a potted history of Catalonia and its problems, the problems that Catalonia and Castile have had of coexisting on the Iberian Peninsula.
So, with everything that's going on in Barcelona at the moment, this must be pretty monumental for you, seeing everything that you thought come to fruition.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether things are coming to fruition. We're living a massively historical moment. I've been kind of I've identified as Catalan. I've got a double identity. It's pretty clear that I wasn't born in Catalonia, but I've been living here since 1988. And for some bizarre reason, I decided to learn to speak the Catalan language, and this opened loads of doors to me. And my wife's I'm going off on a track here, but I'll give you some background to why I feel the way I do. But my first wife's aunt was a very kind of militant old Catalan lady who'd lived through the Spanish Civil War and also lived under Francoism. And I started a PhD in history after university, and so way back at the beginning of the 90s, I started visiting Catalonia with her as my guide, and she started teaching me the history. So when I write about history, a lot of it comes from Tia Magdalena, Aunt Magdalena, and it's a very personal view that I have of the history of Catalonia because it's something that I identify with. So now we're in this current face-off between Spain, and you see, it's not really Spain. I suppose the book shouldn't have been called Catalonia. It's not Spain. It's Catalonia is not Castile. But what's happened in many respects is Castile has has taken control of Spain. The Spanish identity is the Castilian Andalusian identity, and the Catalans have been pushed out. So this is the face-off that we're involved in at the moment. You just said it was becoming reality. We're in a very difficult situation now. The Spanish government has taken control of the Catalan government, and we're moving. I mean, we're really moving where no independence movement has ever gone before. We're moving into really unknown territory. So these are fascinating times.
How do you see it progressing?
Um, okay, what's the Spanish government has taken over the Catalan government, the Generalitat. Uh, the Catalan president is in exile in Belgium and gave a press conference this lunchtime. Basically, what the next thing that's going to happen is they're going to be, these are called autonomous elections. So for the autonomous region which we live, Catalonia is an autonomous region of Spain that has a degree of devolution, not as much as the British press would like to think, but it has a degree of devolution. So we're going to have elections for the Catalan Parliament because the Spanish government have taken over the Catalan government. Now, these are going to be converted into another proxy referendum. So instead of the referendum that was banned and the police attacked, the referendum will take place in the form of an election. Because what will happen, I think, is the two sides are going to side up, and there's going to be the pro-independence parties and the anti-independence parties, and this election is going to be fought on purely one issue. And to a certain extent, whoever wins, then the next stage will be there'll have to be some kind of international mediation. If the pro independence parties win the election, then I suspect that the reason why Carles Puigdemont, the Catalan president, is in Brussels is there's been some backroom pressure from the EU to turn this into some kind of vote. According to the Spanish constitution, there can't be a referendum, so they've turned it into an election. And I think there's going to have to be some kind of mediation because I would suspect if the pro-independence forces can get their act together, because this has been a surprise, then I think there's a slight majority in favour of independence. And if that comes out winning again, then there's just going to have to be some international mediation. That's the way I see things playing out at the moment.
So let's say Barcelona did gain some independence. What would the reality of that be?
Well, not Barcelona, it's Catalonia.
Pardon me, okay.
Barcelona is the capital of Catalonia, which is an ancient, you might get listeners calling in and arguing with me about this, but I've written extensively about the history of this. It's an ancient European nation. It's got its own language. It's one of the richest parts of Spain. It's one of the richest regions of Europe. So Spain as a whole is a net receiver from the European Union, but Catalonia ends up paying. So Catalonia could survive economically. It's strategically very important. Barcelona is a kick-ass city. I live here. I love it. It's a tourist centre. It's modern. It's ancient. It's vibrant. It's exciting. It's got beautiful women, great food, and one of the best football teams in the world. Do you think we really couldn't survive on our own? I think we could survive very, very well. And I'm a great believer. We'll probably move on to politics in general a little bit later. But one of the parts of my activism is I actually believe in small is beautiful, in government of proximity. I think one of the problems with big government and big states is they tend to end up having unwieldy social welfare systems. With a smaller state, it needs to be much leaner, much more efficient. And at the moment, we've got a troublesome left wing here, which I don't like very much. But I think in a couple of years' time, people will realise that in order to function as a small state, then we can't afford massive welfare infrastructures. So it'll be leaned down. It'll be socially libertarian, classical liberal in the future. That's what I would like to see. And I think it would be positive for us. I also think it would be positive for Europe. I think open government, I think when you've got your politicians just down the road, so I can go down to the Parliament offices and give them shit if I want to, I think that's good for democracy. I think I'm a Brexiteer. I'm against governments being a long way away and dictating things with me apparently having no say over them. So I think independence, if we get it, will work very well for Spain as they think it will be. It'll force Spain to get efficient, because Spain's a great country at the same time. I'm not slagging Spain. I just think Catalonia would be better governing itself.
Indeed. Do you see similarities between what's going on with Catalonia and Spain and the whole Brexit campaign over in the UK?
Yeah, well, in fact, it's funny actually that it was my activism in Catalan independence that made me understand the Brexit problem, because, as I said before, I've lived here for 30 years. So Brexit and Euroscepticism seemed a long way away. There's never been until now very much Euroscepticism. So I really didn't understand Brexit. But then I saw the Brexit campaign, the whole fear campaign about the economy, started researching the European Union, and I realised that the two situations are completely analogous. If you want sovereignty for yourself, that's sovereignty from unreasonably large states like Spain that don't have very much natural democracy, or unreasonably large supranational organisations like the European Union that don't have very much culture of democracy. So I think the two things are very similar. And lots of people, I think that the Catalans are beginning to wake up to the rottenness of the European Union, the fact that nobody's spoken out about the violence on referendum day, that the fact that the European Union hasn't been prepared to come and mediate between a very aggressive state and, a relatively weak region, shows that the European Union is not about democracy. It's about power and it's about money. And they're a bunch of scumbags, in my opinion.
Indeed. How did the population of Catalonia react to the violence? Because it was unprecedented. I've never quite seen images like that. And I said to you previously, I've lived out in Spain, so I'm aware that the Guardia Civil are quite violent when it comes to dealing with the public. But this was like the step up from the Guardia Civil, wasn't it? They were all suited and booted in armour, and there was no discrimination. Old women were still getting it. It was horrible scenes.
Yeah, I mean, we were appalled. I mean, I don't think we were so surprised because, and again, me as someone who writes about history, and as I said earlier, my wife's aunt Magdalena had lived through the Civil War, and I've spoken to lots and lots of old people. One of my great passions actually is sitting in bars, getting into chats with old men.
Yeah.
Because that's where you get really kind of living history. So I've talked loads and loads about the Franco period and the Civil War. So, and lots of people here are fully aware that there's a kind of, I'm loath to use the word fascist, but there's a certain totalitarian, authoritarian lack of democratic culture here, and if they can't win by arguments, then they'll hit you. That's basically the attitude. So I don't think people were that surprised. People were disgusted, and on the positive side, it's given the Catalans the chance to occupy the moral high ground to a certain extent.
Yeah, indeed. Simon, when did you first become politically active?
Oof. Well, I'm 57, so I've been on this earth for quite a while now. I suppose it's all my life really. My grandfather was a trades unionist. He was the East Midlands president of the Transport and General Workers Union. So from when I was a very, very little lad, I was kind of aware of the fight of the working class, workers' rights. My granddad was a kind of traditional working class socialist who stood up for his men and mind speaking out. And it's also, I think, where I've inherited the gift of the gab from, because he was a bloke that talked about politics. And so I was really, when I was really little, I remember sitting with my granddad and him talking about this. Then my mother married a middle-class bloke. So I went from very poor working class Nottingham to a very posh grammar school where I was the poor kid. Well, no, because we'd moved into quite a nice family. We'd become quite a nice family, but I was the kid who used to swear a lot, the kid with the bad, with the bad manners, who coincidentally actually used to get very good marks, which annoyed people, and that's when my kind of left wing ideas started solidifying. Then I got to university, was kind of involved in lefty groups. Joined the Labour Party for a while, was vaguely associated with the International Marxist Group. I wasn't a member, but I had lots of friends in the International Marxist Group who were a Nottingham organisation. And then the miners' strike, and I was heavily involved in Knots Miners on strike. So it's basically all my life, really. I'm a kind of naturally outspoken person, or when I see something happening, I can't help but stick my oar in. Mm-hmm. So so it's been forever. I can't remember not being involved really.
Mm-hmm. And you've been hospitalised for your views when you were younger, no?
Yeah, I got beaten up a few times. Well, because again, we moved to this posh village. It's a village called Frodsham in Cheshire, and then I went back to university in Nottingham. And I've always been into music. I played in post-punk bands and really, really, really into reggae, and used to hang around with quite a few black people. And one night was coming out of a pub, and there were a gang of, this is back in 1980, 1981, coming out of a pub, and there were a gang of National Front skins walking down the street, Zeke Hiling. Now, as I told you before, my grandfather was a trades unionist in this part of town, and my great-great-great-grandfather, or I don't know how many greats it is, but quite a distance back, he was the first blacksmith on the River Leen, which is it's what my granddad always used to say to me: "You're an aristocrat, Simon, but you're a working class aristocrat, and don't never forget that. So that there's a kind of certain sense that I've always had. I've got a very strong sense of belonging and community and territory and the land. You know, you've got to belong to places. You've got to feel part and commit yourself to where you are, I think. And so this just happened to be about 100 meters away, from 100 yards away from where my great great granddad had his blacksmith shop. And I thought, I'm not having fucking people Zeke hiling down our streets. So there's me on my own outside the pub and about 10 skinheads. And you can imagine the expletives that came out of my mouth. And so they kind of all laid into me. And I managed to fight for a reasonable period of time. I was a lot younger then. But then I got my head split open. And I mean, it's about 10 to 1. It's kind of difficult odds. So I just ran like shit. And I ended up running into a chip shop, bleed with blood all over my face, and the guys and the people in the chip shop took me to the hospital. And then the problem was, after that, I'd kind of been recognised as a trouble causer, so I got attacked a couple more times. I ended up in the emergency one more time as a result of that. I mean, it was never serious, but you know, you had to have a couple of stitches on my eye both times, and you know, it's not very nice. Wandering around your part of town thinking you're going to get whacked, basically.
Getting whacked, and also seeing people walking down the street Zeke-lining as well. That's something that no one wants to see. So, Mr. Left Wing, when did the shift to the right start beginning?
Well, no, I don't actually believe that I've shifted to the right. I just think the left has left me behind. I'm not sure that my values have changed.
Okay.
However much they call me a Nazi and a racist, I'm not a Nazi or a racist. I think the world has changed quite a lot, and yeah, I think mass immigration. I think one thing is controllable immigration, another thing is mass immigration, and another thing is Islam. Another thing is the welfare state or the education system as something that was liberating for a young lad, working class lad like me, that seemed to open up possibilities. I mean, I'm a great defender of the health service. It's fundamentally important, and I'm a great example of someone who wouldn't have been able to go to university. I wouldn't have been able to go to the great school I went to, given my background, were it not for a state-based education system. I think what's happened in the last 40 years is things have got out of hand, and the extreme left and the politically correct left has taken over things. So I'm not sure that I've changed. I think what the definition of left wing is has moved to a position to which I find uncomfortable. I mentioned earlier that I'd been associated with people like the International Marxist. Well, I'd known people, and the Socialist Workers' Party. And to be perfectly honest, back in the early 80s, I realised I didn't like them. I'm a traditionalist, libertarian. I stand up for people. I believe in people. I believe that everybody should be given a chance. The more authoritarian, politically correct, and social justicey the left has become, then that's made me reject it. And the fact that I have a serious problem with Islam means that I get accused of being something that I don't actually believe I am. I think I'm more or less the same as I ever was, actually.
I'm glad you said that, really, because I'm pretty politically naive, especially when it comes to diagnosing, like, if I'm left or right. But just from all the contributors who taught me about Islam, and also me being critical of that ideology, I just straight away labeled myself as a right-winger, because I thought that's the deal. But it's interesting from your, a slightly greater perspective, saying that it's the left has gone so crazy, you can't really adhere to that anymore. And so, what if you're not politically correct with the whole left? Does that mean you're right? No, there is some more ambiguity as to where you can lie on the political spectrum.
Yeah, and I'm not sure whether left and right is as relevant as it used to be, because things have got much more complicated. There was an interesting cover. I don't like The Economist, but I think the basic distinction now, one of the main political distinctions, is nationalist globalist. And I don't mean nationalist in the kind of negative sense. I mean, do you believe in borders or not having borders? And I strongly believe, and the reason why I'm active in terms of Catalonia is I believe that countries and cultures have their identity. That doesn't imply hating anybody else, but I'm English. I'm from the north, well, from Nottingham in the north. I'm very proud of that culture, and I want it to be. And I'm kind of locked in the England of 30 years ago, and I love it. And I have this idealized view of England. And then I come here to Catalonia, and I realized that I came to Catalonia. I didn't come so that Catalonia would turn into Bradford or Brick Lane. What interests me about this place is precisely its culture, and I think I'm an extremely open-minded, integrative person because I've been able to adapt fully to this. But I'm also conscious that what I love about this place is precisely the fact that it's different from England, it's different from France, it's different from, it's got its own identity. And I think the massive problem is with mass immigration, the immigration of my youth. I think my story about the NF shows that I'm not a racist. But back in those days, that this was these were workable numbers. I think when you're talking about between 300,000 and 500,000 people coming into the UK every year, numbers and the culture, you just can't deal with it, and those kind of massive numbers create resentment. And I think if we're coherent, we have to be honest about what is practical, what is realistic, and the fact that it's not unreasonable to want to protect your own culture. That's basically my view. In many respects, I'm a traditional socialist. I don't think I've moved massively from how I was when I was 20, really.
That's good to know. That's good to know. So when did you first realize that Islam, because with me, I was a little bit of an apologist at first. When the terrorist attacks started happening after 2011 or 2001, pardon me, it took me maybe up to Charlie Hebdo. From 9/11 to Charlie Hebdo, I was an apologist. When did you start realizing that there was an issue with Islam and it's something that you need to look into?
Well, actually, strangely, it was Charlie Hebdo was my red pill moment.
Yeah.
I've done quite a lot of television here in Catalonia, or English. I've been on a lot of English-speaking programs. Because it's a minority language, there's a channel that does an hour in English every day.
Okay.
And I used to be quite a frequent guest. And I happened to be on the day after the Charlie Hebdo attack. And everybody else, and we normally talk about Catalan politics, but we had to talk about this. And everybody else on the panel was looking at, was explaining it away as American foreign policy, as racism, as anything but Islam. And I remember sitting on the panel and not really having my ideas formed to say, no, look, you're wrong here. There's this wrong with it, this wrong with it. These people think this. This is an ideological problem. And so it's basically that day that I decided, okay, you've really got to gen up on this. I'm not going to be on a television program and have my opinions walked over without having strong arguments. And because I'm a belligerent sort, I've kind of investigated and researched this fully since then. But it's a relatively, I never liked it, but it's only since Charlie Hebdo that I've really taken it upon myself to be active in fighting against what I've seen as a nefast ideology. I think it's disgusting, dangerous, and antithetical to everything we stand for.
I couldn't agree more. How did you go about learning Islam?
Reading, lots of stuff on YouTube. People like Bill Warner, Robert Spencer, Pamela Ganner, Geert Wilders. Lots. I mean, it's just. I'm kind of very stubborn when I get something in my head, and because I'm used to getting into arguments, I manage to get myself into arguments all the time, and I don't like to lose them. What I tend to do is if I know I'm going to get into an argument, then I gen up on things. And so it's been over 2 years. It's been nearly 3 years now. I've been genning up on Islam. Also the interesting thing is, prior to that, because I knew a lot about the history of Spain, I knew anyway, without having a dog in the fight really, I knew about the history of Islam in Spain and the Mediterranean. And I knew this from a purely historical matter, rather than I didn't really know the ideology, but I knew they were up to no good. So then when I saw apologists on people like Care on YouTube, or people like Reza Aslan, or Tariq, Tariq Ramadan is his name. Mm-hmm. People just who lie through their teeth about this, about the history of it, about how it's come to dominate. I knew all about this without ever considering about an enemy. I was writing about the problems of Catalonia and Castile, but inevitably, as I was researching all this, I had to learn about Islam at the same time. So all of a sudden, when it hit me in the face, I'd got quite a lot of information at my fingertips, really.
Yeah, indeed. Simon, you and I are on the same page. That was exactly the segue I was going to take into talking about when Spain was an Islamic country. You took the lead on that one. So it's something I really do want to explore. It's also one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you, because whenever Islam gets introduced to a country, it doesn't kind of just, share the country with a Christian country or whatever, blah, 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 blah. Over a period of time, it will take over and dominate. A great example of that is Turkey. Turkey used to be a Christian country, and now it's 99.7% Muslim. Spain went through this issue, but Spain actually came out the other end. Now, was it 9 centuries that Spain was an Islamic country? Or I tell you what, take the lead from here. If you can just tell us a little bit about the history with Spain and Islam, I'll be more than happy to hear.
Well, Islam is a little bit different in Spain, because they crossed the Straits of Gibraltar in 711, and basically the Visigoth culture, that dominated Spain prior to that, was kind of weak and a little bit decadent, a little bit like Europe is now.
Sorry, just quickly, I'm not too sure what that term is. What is a Visigoth? What is that?
Yeah, the Visigoths. When the Roman Empire fell apart between the 5th century, and then the Visigoths occupied Spain. And basically, what they did is they took on Roman culture, they took on Christianity, and they ruled the whole of the Iberian Peninsula and a large section of southern France. So it was an important culture, really. Uh-huh. And basically it was a continuation of the Roman culture, and it's one of these cultures that's people don't know very much about it, but it's really, really interesting. They had great architecture, fantastic art, a very good legal system. Yeah, as I said, they were the continuation of the Romans, but they'd got decadent and weak, and all of a sudden this aggressive, proud culture came across the Straits of Gibraltar and basically conquered the Iberian Peninsula in 3 or 4 years. So by 715, 716, they got the whole of the Iberian Peninsula under their control. And then they moved right up into France and got as far as Poitiers, Tours, which is about 250 kilometers south of Paris. And at the Battle of Tours in 732, Charles Martel, who wasn't a king, he was the mayor of the palace, the mayor of the palace of the Merovingian kings. I know my history. He led an army and stopped the Turks and stopped the Muslims, the Saracens as they were called then, from getting up into the north of Europe. And I mean, this is one of the crucial moments in European history. Had Charles Martel not turned them back, then Islam would have got here a lot earlier, and we'd have never had. Europe would have changed permanently.
So the Saracens came over to Spain, they took root, they tried to progress through to France, and that was denied. But how long was it in Spain for? It was there for a while, wasn't it? So how comes it didn't take root permanently? How comes it was actually, pushed out of Spain eventually?
Well, basically because the Castilians and the Catalans fought them. Right. Okay, it was actually on the they arrived in 711, and they were finally completely expelled from the Iberian Peninsula in 1492.
Wow.
So that's what, about nearly 900 years. But the truth is that the Castilians and Catalans had turned it around by the middle of the 12th, but the middle of the 13th century, really. And they pushed them right back. There's a battle called Navas de Tolosa, which I think is 1205, which is really the turning point when the Christian forces, the Castilians, the Catalans, the Portuguese, and the Navarrans, the kind of Basques, all allied together, and there was a massive battle, and basically the Muslims were pushed back, and then from then on, the various Christian kingdoms that were in the north of the peninsula kind of pushed them back, so that by 1492 there was just a small area called the Kingdom of Granada, and it was basically it was a military thing. The only way to get rid of Muslims is to fight them. And I've talked to people like Gavin Bobby and Paul Weston on this issue, and it sounds very bellicose, but I think if you allow Islam to get a foothold, and I've looked at lots of history, the only way to get rid of them is to fight them, and the Spanish or the various Iberian nations were successful in doing this, basically.
Have you got examples of other nations that are successful in fighting Islam?
Well, I think there aren't many, actually. I think Islam is. I think Israel is another post-Islam nation. There's also various parts of the Balkans. They got to the gates of Vienna in 1683, was it? So the Ottoman Empire pushed well up into Europe and was pushed back. Also, what people don't realise is lots of the Mediterranean islands were controlled by the Muslims. Another important thing about the Catalans, I'm like super proud of being an adopted Catalan, because the Catalans were really the Islam killers of the Middle Ages. They had a group of mercenaries called the Almogavers, whose battle cry was "Iron Awake," and they used to go and slaughter people on islands. But Sicily, Corsica, large parts of Greece, the southern Italy, all were under Muslim control at one time or another. And this medieval period, basically the Mediterranean was cleaned up by a combination of the Catalans, the Venetians, the various trading nations, because with the Muslims with Islam in the Mediterranean, nobody could trade. The reason why Catalonia, or the Crown of Aragon as it became known, became such an important empire was because they got rid of the Muslims off Mallorca, and up until 1232, I think, 1232, the Muslims controlled Mallorca and were continually attacking the Catalan coast, and it was impossible to go out and trade. So they had to conquer Mallorca in order to clean out the Mediterranean, and then they went out cleaning out the other islands for the next couple of centuries, and that's how the Mediterranean basically became such a powerful trading region. And I can go on for hours about this, but one of the reasons why 1492 was such an important year was that was the year the Catholic kings, that's Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabel of Castile, kicked the Muslims off the Iberian Peninsula. It was also the year that Columbus set out in the other direction to try and find a different route to the Indias. That's one of the stories about why the Americas were discovered or colonized, was basically because in the Mediterranean the Ottoman Empire was coming strong again, and the reason why 1492 was the important date is in the 1490s the Ottomans had started attacking the Catalan and Valencian coast, and there was various battles, and with the Kingdom of Granada on the Iberian Peninsula, it was like having a fifth column in Spain. And also there were various Muslim converts in Spain called the Moriscos, And this is why the Inquisition came about. The Inquisition has a terrible name. I think when you start using violence, the problem is violence gets out of happened is the Inquisition was really to try and quell the Muslim fifth column that was in Spain, because there were Muslims who had apparently converted, but every time but they rebelled against their Christian rulers by now, and there was a threat from the Ottoman Empire, and this is why they decided to get rid of the Kingdom of Granada, impose the Inquisition, and look for a route to India via the Atlantic, because the Mediterranean was becoming unnavigable again. I mean, it's a fascinating story, but basically the point is, where Islam goes, it causes trouble.
What I'd like to ask you about is, I was checking out your YouTube channel and you've got your playlist set up. You've done a fair bit of work on the Golden Age of Islam, and I'd just like to ask you, what is the Golden Age of Islam?
The Golden Age of Islam. Well, it depends on who you talk to. It's one of these constantly change. This is what's typical with Islam. They move the goalposts all the time. Originally, the Golden Age of Islam was the period just after the death of Muhammad, when the first caliphs did this massive push and conquered loads of territory. But over the years, and perhaps in the last couple of decades, the Golden Age of Islam has come to mean the period in I can't remember, in Baghdad, and the Caliph of Cordoba in Spain, which they've kind of talked about as being this golden age of culture, where Christians, Jews and Muslims all lived together in peace and harmony. And this was the greatest period, when the rest of Europe was in the Dark Ages and we were backwards and basically living in this advanced society, and they were inventing all these things. And the basic Muslim story is, or Islamic story is, that Europe has to be thankful to Islam because they discovered absolutely everything in this period, and it's utter and complete rubbish, as I try and point out in my videos.
Indeed. All right, cool. Let's focus on Simon Harris, the YouTube personality, huh? So, after Charlie Hebdo, you started researching Islam. How long was that period between researching and then when you decided to open your mouth and start telling people what you had learnt?
Well, it was starting up a YouTube channel is a slow process, because you kind of I began the channel ages ago talking about Catalonia. Okay. Then Brexit happened, and I made a few videos about Brexit, kind of 300 visits and not very much interest. Then after the Trump victory, I decided, well, this is interesting, that the power of YouTube is massive, and I'd kind of quite like to start discussing politics in general. And by this time I was interested in Brexit, I was interested in sovereignty, I was interested in the political situation in the United States. So I started making videos in general about things that were generally interesting to me, and I didn't have any specific focus. And then slowly I became, and I suppose it's not a question of research. It's a bit of, you're putting the cart before the horse, really, in some respects. As I started making the videos, I thought, well, this subject really interests me. Then I was getting good feedback from people, which encouraged me to do more research into the topic and try and look at different angles on Islam, and again the whole issue of European culture. One of my interesting points is that I think European culture is in danger, and it's in particular danger from Islam. So it's a slow process. But basically, I've been an active YouTuber for less than a year. It was kind of the beginning of 2017 that I really started taking my YouTube channel seriously, and then probably it was February, March when I started making videos about Islam. And then I just got mad about it, really. It's been a slow process.
It's been a slow process, but once it actually took off, it seems to have taken off pretty damn fast, because I'm surprised that you say you started doing that more frequently at the beginning of this year, because I saw you speak at the Last Day of Silence March up in London, which was, a couple of months ago, something like that, 6 weeks. Now, how did you get invited over to speak over in London? Now, did you come over? This is something I want to know as well. Did you come over specifically for that, or did it coincide with some other plans that you had?
No, I came over specifically for it. Ryan, who's the boyfriend of M, who was the motivator, the genius organizer
Yeah.
of the Last Day of Silence, just contacted me on Twitter and said, we're organizing this demo. Would you like to make a video about it? Because I made videos about the EDL, because I'd done some research into the EDL. I'd done the Football Lads Alliance. And so Ryan just said, we're doing this. Would you give us some publicity? And I don't know, there's just something about the way he approached me. You know, sometimes you get a vibe off people. And I just felt I liked him. So I followed him back, and we exchanged a few messages. And I said to him, well, yeah, I don't mind making a video about you, but why don't I come over and talk? That would be great. So he said yes, and put me in touch with Em, his girlfriend, and we chatted a little bit by Skype. And yeah, I did come over specifically for it, partly because, as I said, I'm not just a YouTuber. I suppose I am an activist to some extent. I like to express my opinion. And I thought this was a good way. What I liked about it was not specifically political. It didn't belong to any group. They seemed like a nice group of regular folk, which, as I went on the day, that's what they turned out to be. So I thought, well, yeah, for my first, this is a great trip to come over to London, drink some decent beer, and meet some nice people, and to a certain extent, demonstrate my commitment to both to fighting this horrible ideology in the UK, where it's much more of a problem here. But also the other interesting thing is, I think this is going to become an increasing problem here where I live. So it was, in many respects, I feel that if I make friends with people who've got more experience with me, I'll be better equipped to campaign with friends. So it's a two-way process.
Yeah, indeed. How did you find it? Did you enjoy the experience?
Yeah, it was great, and we got really drunk in the pub. I met Anne-Marie Waters, met lots of nice people. What I really liked about it is they were just regular folk.
How did you find Anne-Marie then? And what are your views on her? Your views on her political stance?
I think Anne-Marie. I was very disappointed that she didn't win the UKIP nomination. I think she's got a difficult job on her hands setting up the new party. I know there's a lot of enthusiasm for Britain, but she would have been a lot better equipped if she'd taken over UKIP. I completely agree with her on Islam, and actually, I think we agree on. We didn't really get the chance to talk very much, and a lot of beer was consumed, so what we talked about wasn't always that coherent. But I think there's lots of elements of her politics. I mean, she's got a left-wing past as well, so she's not as in inverted commas right-wing as many people would suggest, much the same way as I'm not. She's a great defender of the National Health Service, and I would like to talk to her more. In fact, I'm going to invite her to do an interview with me at some point, and I'd like to discuss elements of not just Islam, but the kind of political program that she envisions, and what balance you need between the welfare state and the free economy. I mean, I think it's very important that we need a safety net for people. Not everybody is capable. People fall on hard times. I think we need to have a fair and just society. But it's finding that balance, because you don't want people to be sponges, and you don't want an education system that turns into a propaganda tool. So I think actually finding that balance between how much government is necessary and how much free market economy is necessary is an interesting discussion.
For sure. How do you feel about immigrants and welfare?
I mean, I think you have to think about how long somebody's been here. I think just coming over for welfare and expecting to get welfare or you worked, I think it would make sense to have, I don't know, a 5-year period. I'm just throwing some kind of
Hmm.
figure out. For someone who is capable of work, then I think one of the problems with the welfare state is it's become like a magnet for sponges around the world, and this is making me sound very very right wing, and it's not. Um, but I think you have to prove your worth to a country. I think it's perfectly reasonable that there should be a selective system over what kind of immigrants you want coming to the country. And I argued this based on my own case here in Catalonia. Um, Basically, most of my time here, I've taught English. I've taught English to a level, being a native English teacher, being a native English person, to a level that most Spanish or Catalan people can't do it. Therefore, I think I've been an asset to the society. Um, and I think this should be applied in any country. I think you should encourage immigration as long as these people are an asset. If they come here and all of a sudden they're using the health service or drawing benefits, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me.
No, it's not on. You know, I've worked with a lot of Polish people before, and these guys got great work ethics. They well and truly do. But I talked to them about like welfare and stuff like that, and they've said, he goes, look, I have friends back home in Poland who apply for job seekers allowance over in England, come over once, I think it is. I'm not sure what the deal is, but it's literally 2 minutes of time, and then that's it. Bang, they're on benefits straight away. They get the benefits sorted out before they even enter the country. And it just seems crazy, really. And I don't blame the people for taking it. I blame the fact that it's an offer. It shouldn't be an offer. You know, it should be a little bit harder to access that pool.
Yeah, I mean, a large part of my politics isn't directed actually against individuals. It's much more against, in the case of Islam, ideology. And what interests me about um, my ideas about politics in general is the system. That you've got to make the system fair. You basically, if you make the system too easy for people to cheat, then they will, because everybody likes an easy life. So it's not really the fault of the individual;
Yeah,
it's the fault of the system. So you've got to get a correct balance with the system.
yeah.
And
Couldn't agree with you more on that one. Well and truly. And I interrupted you there I had a great thing to say, and it's bloody gone. Huh? That's not good. So instead, I'm going to refer to my piece of paper in front of me, or I'm going to try. Hold on. Now, you referenced the Football Lads Alliance before. Did you attend the first march?
no, but I followed it very closely, and I thought it was a very cool thing. I'm a massive football fan.
Okay.
And I think one of the interesting things about me, and what makes me slightly different, is I self-style actually as a yobbo intellectual, because I've got a big there's a big because I'm a working class lad. I've got plenty of book learning, and I've taught at universities and all that. But my roots are pretty humble, and I really kind of like football, and I like the kind of tribal nature of it, and I like making noise, and I like getting drunk, and I like shouting, and I like wearing shirts, and I like hugging my mates, and so football's something. It's always been really important to me. I was a big Forest fan when I was in the UK,
Yeah.
and inevitably I'm a Barcelona fan here. And
Glory hunter, Simon. You glory hunter.
no, I'm not. Well, I mean, okay, let's talk a little bit about Barca, and we'll get back to the Football Lads Alliance. I came here in 1988 when Barca were a big club, but they'd never won any European Cups, and they were an important club basically because they were the rival in Spain to Real Madrid, so they had an important fan base, but they were completely unsuccessful. And I've now celebrated, I think, 5 European Cups and Champions League leagues with them. But I've got a Koeman shirt from 1989. So I was into this before they were anywhere near as fashionable as people say. So I can defend this very strongly. When I wear my Koeman shirt with my mates, I've got kind of lots of Catalan mates, and sometimes to the big games, I wear my Koeman shirt, and I just point out to these young lads, look, this Koeman shirt is older than you are,
Yeah.
so don't come it about me being a glory seeker. Anyway, we'll go back to the Football Lads Alliance.
We certainly
I think
will.
it's a very positive thing. I know they've been criticised quite a lot for talking about extremism rather than being
Yes.
more specific about the problem, and the problem is terrorism, and particularly Islam terrorism. But I think the important thing is you can't politicize people too quickly, and I think it's important to get people involved, and it's important to get people going along uh, and considering the problem. Um, okay, extremism is obviously the euphemism, but what they've got to do is get the numbers out and get people out on the streets and get people listening to the speakers, because I think everybody really knows that it's not any old kind of extremism. It's we're talking a particular kind of extremism. So I think it's a very positive thing.
I'd agree with you to a certain extent, but I think their failure to identify the issue is going to be their downfall. And also how there's a lot of support. I attended a Football Lads Alliance march, the second one up in London. It was crazy, especially after attending the last day of silence, to go for that one, which was like a couple of hundred people, maybe a few more, to go to one which is like thousands and thousands of people. It was mad. And I got a huge sense of pride doing it. There was women lining the street saying, "Come on, boys, well done," showing their support. I thought, wow, this is going to be great. But then they come out and they criticize Tommy Robinson, the whole thing with Big Phil Campion as well. And I think they've lost a lot of support from the core people who really do rally against Islam in the UK. When they see that the football lads aren't going to identify the issue, I think they're going to lose the support of probably people they didn't want the support of in the first place. But I think they're trying to distinguish themselves from people like Tommy Robinson, this and that. But the media's not going to distinguish between the two. They're going to be tarred with the same brush. So I don't know. It's a difficult one, and I think they might have. If I was them, I probably would have played my cards slightly differently, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I was very enthusiastic about the first march,
Yeah.
a little bit less so than with the second march, and particularly with the big Phil Campion bust up. I mean, that's just a massive mistake, and I can't remember the guy I saw doing a monologue on this on.
I know exactly who you're talking about. Some white guy shaved head with tattoos, in good shape.
Yeah, I mean, he really nails it. I
Yep.
mean, Tommy Robinson, and again, Tommy Robinson is should be an inspiration to all us all. He's been the guy that stood there, that's faced all the trouble for years before this became a fashionable thing. And I mean, Tommy Robinson is an English treasure, the guy, and the fact that Phil Campion came out, I think, was worse than their kind of euphemistic use of the word extremism. The problem really was when Phil Campion came out and said it, and he still seems to be messing around. And as this, I can't remember the guy's name, as this guy says, if you're going to lead, you've got to be honest, and honesty above anything else is the fundamental thing. Mess up, be an idiot, but be honest. And I don't think Big Phil Campion was honest about this, and I think their association with him has lost them a lot of support, really.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more. Now, Football Lads Alliance, huge march. You attended another march, the last day of silence, not as big, in Barcelona or Catalonia, or however you want to refer to it as, or let's say greater place, greater, Spain. Do you ever have any of these protests and marches going on? Because you see them in Germany, you see them in Poland. Any in Spain?
It's not as an established problem here yet. There's very small. I'm because of my activism and because of my knowledge about what's happening in the UK and other countries, I'm in touch with people, and I've been to a few meetings, and but we've not had any big demonstrations yet, for various reasons. Because yes, there is. I think there's going to be a problem with Islam. We had the first. Well, there was a terrorist attack in 2004, I think it was, in Madrid, but we had the first major attack in more than a decade in Barcelona in August. So people weren't very conscious of the problem. Also, there's a big difference here that the nature of the communities. Muslim immigration didn't really start coming here till the mid 1990s. In 1995, I'm not sure of the statistic, but roughly there are about 35,000 Muslims here, and most of them come from Morocco. So they're not as culturally distant as people from Pakistan are.
Hmm.
They're just across the way, and there's been lots of association between Spain and Morocco. But there were 35,000 in 1995. Now there are 500,000. Okay, so this has been a massive change, and there are certain towns that are um, reaching 30% Muslim, and this is starting to be a problem. But then we're not at third, fourth generation yet. So the community and problems like halal meat, terrorism, I imagine arranged marriages, lots of the problems that you're very familiar with in the UK, nobody knows about yet here. So basically, one of my motivations for learning about Islam is I'm learning what's happening in the UK so that I can predict what will happen in 5 years from now from here, and hopefully then we'll be better equipped to deal with it in a sensible way before the problem really gets too much out of hand.
Indeed. How does the media approach Islam?
Much the same as the media anywhere,
Yeah.
and I mean the left, the media is generally left wing, generally libtard. I mean, it's the right word for them. They are libtards. These people are blind, politically correct idiots. I think they all need a good walloping myself because they're opening the door to something that they're not really aware, and they're not really aware of the danger of it, because just like the media in the UK, they don't bother reading the Quran, they don't bother studying the life of Muhammad. They think it's like any old religion. They can't really tell the difference between a Muslim, a Hindu, and a Sikh. They're all Asians as far as they're concerned, and all religions are the same. So the media give it a very free ride. And one of the interesting things is that just after the terrorist attack, it's like it became, part of Fiesta Day for Muslims. The first time loads of Muslims came on television, Muslims got more positive publicity out of a terrorist attack committed by their community than they'd had in the previous 10 years. It's completely insane. So there's a problem with the media here, and there's a problem with left wing. Left wing. We actually have a word for it here. They're called bunistas, or bunism, which means goodism. People who really like to be good and generous and open the doors to refugees and Islam and love everybody and be multicultural. And yeah, they're stupid, and I kind of want to wake them up to this. And I think one of the interesting things that I do, because I'm becoming recognised as an activist on Catalan nationalism, that hopefully that will give me an audience, so that when I talk about other issues, people are going to wake up and listen to me, and they're going to say, well, this bloke's all right when he talks about this, so perhaps he's got a point when he talks about this. And I'll come, hopefully this is coming across in this conversation. I'm not right wing. I'm not a racist. I'm very concerned about a noxious ideology that I think will bring danger. And basically, I want to be able to warn people. I want to warn the people hear about it, because I love these people. Most of the people I love are here, and I don't want them to go down the same way as England. Indeed. I mean, the north of England. Looking at videos of parts of the north of England where I spent my adolescence, it breaks my heart, really. They bear no relation to the England I once knew. And I think that this goes back to the point I made. The reason why I'm in Catalonia is because I love Catalan culture, and I want to safeguard it. So I don't want it being lost to either mass immigration or particularly Muslim immigration.
Indeed. Well, I've got about 7 questions to ask you at the bat of that, but I will start with this one. You say you saw videos of where you grew up. Have you ever revisited where you grew up and seen the actual difference for yourself?
Not really. It's kind of difficult, really, because both my parents are dead now. I've kind of driven through Nottingham a few times, but my parents moved to nice villages once I'd come to Barcelona. And when I go back to the UK, you tend to go back to visit people rather than visit places. And so when my mother was still alive, she lived in Malvern. There's not a massive Muslim community in Malvern. I'd kind of occasionally go into Birmingham and think, whoa.
Yeah, yeah,
But the difference is really what you have to do is you have to spend a large amount of time in a place to really understand the changes that have been made. You can see a video when you watch the videos. The videos are the shocking moments. But if you go to a place, it requires time. And I was in London recently for the last day of silence, and I went around visiting mosques because I'd lived in Finsbury Park
okay,
when I lived in London for a while, and I actually went to have a look around Finsbury Park, and whoa, it's very different from the kind of mainly Irish area that I'd lived in back in the 80s. So yes, I have seen some of the differences, but not so much of the north of England.
yeah, indeed.
But then talking to people from Sheffield, I interviewed uh, Ian Crossland from the English Defence
Yeah, I
League
watched
a
it.
couple of weeks ago, and Ian's from Sheffield, and yeah, he was telling me off outside the interview some of the time just how much Sheffield's changed because this was where I used to go out of a night. This is post-punk time, watching bands like ABC and the Human League and the clubs in Sheffield, and it sounds to me like it bears no relation to the Sheffield I knew and loved. It's very sad, I think.
It is very sad and probably an irreversible process as well. And I live kind of just north of London. A few miles outside Luton. It's so prevalent. All these areas I go to, I just see it the whole time, and I think that's another part of the motivation for me to come up and express myself is that I see the reality on a daily basis, and it's crazy to witness. Look, one of the things I see regularly are niqabs, burqas. Do you ever see that over in Barcelona?
Yeah, again, more and more.
Yeah.
5 years ago, you never saw them, but it's becoming more and more frequent the last couple of years. Starting to see, we live in, I mean, it's utterly and completely lunatic. To a certain extent, you can understand people wearing so many clothes in a cold country like
Yeah.
the UK. But we're in the Mediterranean here, and people see women with full clothing, not niqabs necessarily,
Right.
but their hijabs and just overdress, showing none of their flesh. And we live in a beautiful environment. This is a place where you really want to get your kit off. This is what living in the Mediterranean is all about. It just seems like madness to me. And more so over the last few months, I've seen more people in niqabs, often tourists, I think,
Mm.
but Middle Eastern women in niqabs. And the other day, well, not the other day, it was a few months ago now, on a Saturday morning, I happened to be walking down the street on my way to buy some bread or something, and I saw someone in a niqab, and it wasn't a woman. I was convinced it was the under the niqab there was white training shoes. The gait, the way the person was walking was like an adolescent guy. This individual was going into the centre of town where all the posh shops are, and it really smacked me in the face the amount that this person was up to no good, and how dangerous it is to have people that can basically disguise themselves, and nobody's going to say anything out of political correctness. So yes, it's becoming more frequent.
Yeah, it's certainly a concern, isn't it? It doesn't fit in society. I'm absolutely fine with a hijab. That's cool. But if I can't communicate with you, if I shoot you a smile and you can't smile at me back, then it's just an affront to communication. I see people wearing the whole niqab. Pardon my French here. I just basically see them as telling me to fuck off. I really do. If you wear that, that's what you're saying. Don't come near me. Don't talk to me. Don't interact with me. And I think that's just wrong. We're living in a society together, as a collective, and you adorn that dress, you're just totally isolating yourself, and I get offended by it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally. I simply wouldn't speak to somebody who's wearing a niqab. I can be extremely rude when I want to be. I don't believe that you have a right. If you're wearing that, then I'm not willing to enter into a conversation with you. Full stop. I'm also not very keen on the hijab either, basically because it indicates a kind of conservative, an observance of a conservative form of Islam. If you're prepared to dress in a Western way, and you only have the religious beliefs, but the hijab, basically, it's a sexual marker, isn't it? They're covering their hair because they think that men can't be controlled. And the fact is that when women are wearing hijabs, this turns anyone who isn't wearing a hijab into a target.
Yeah,
and
spot
so there's something very nasty about the hijab. And something I've started doing recently, I get up at ridiculously early hours in the morning, and I've taken to getting up about 4:30 in the morning, going for a 15-minute run. I'm mad, I know, but that's when I do my writing and research, and this is why I need a siesta round about this time of day.
It makes total sense now.
Yeah, I mean, my mad life does make total sense. It's amazing. But I've taken to going on a run town, and you asked me about whether the Islamic problem exists yet. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think people are aware of it in the same way, but I've noticed going on the run, they're not chicken shops, but they're Pakistani supermarkets, little supermarkets. They're all open all night, and they've all got taxis outside them, and it's Muslim. Okay, there's the Pakistani arrivals have come in the last 5 years, but they're all Pakistani owned, and the Pakistanis have taken over the drug business here in Barcelona, and again, you run past them and you think, these people are up to no good. What are they doing? And if you say anything about this, people say you're being racist. But it's 4:30 in the morning, and here they are, all blokes hanging around with their taxis, and they just look like they're hatching something. And it reminds me of the situations of the grooming gangs in the UK. So it kind of worries me for the future.
So it should. Now, once again, you and I are on the same page today. You keep kind of doing the segues for me, which is brilliant. About 20 minutes ago, I was kind of I was clutching for my question, but I remembered it. And you were talking about the future, and my question was, if you were in charge, Simon, you were the political leader of Europe, the world, what would you do regarding the issue with Islam?
I mean, I'd be very hardline. I'd ban all immigration from Islamic countries. Then the next thing I'd do, I think there's a process of applying laws. You don't need to have any new laws. I think the rationale for not having any more Islamic immigration is we can't cope with it. The communities are big enough as it is. Yeah. Then you need a slow process of applying laws. Female genital mutilation, it's illegal. Ban it and prosecute people. Halal meat. I think it was Blackburn or Bolton, was it recently, where the council have banned halal meat or banned people.
Something like that. I think it was Lancashire, but around there, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Animals have to be killed in a. Okay, it's not humane is the wrong word, but they have to be killed in a civilized fashion. They have to be stunned before they're killed. I'm a carnivore. I don't like to see needless suffering. I don't want to see suffering for religious reasons. Mosques need to have CCTV cameras in them, and they need to be monitored for hate speech and people planning terror attacks. And the same hate speech laws. I'm not a great lover of hate speech laws, but if we have these laws, then they have to be applied in exactly the same way to any person that is preaching hatred of another part of the community. And in mosques, we know this is happening, so they need to be strictly monitored. Forced marriages shouldn't be allowed. Polygamy. You need to be very strict about the kind of benefits a man with more than one wife can get. In the UK, in all Western European countries, a man is allowed one wife. That's it. All the other wives get nothing. I think you need to have a strict application of the law, and there shouldn't be any allowances made for supposed religious reasons, because the truth is Jews, Sikhs, Hindus, Buddhists don't ask for special treatment. It's only Muslims who ask for special treatment, and they shouldn't be given it, in my opinion.
Certainly not. Not like returning jihadis being given council homes as an incentive to return.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even mention that. I mean, there's this. Apologies for the language, but this kind of arse-licking behaviour on the part of our governors is just it's just insane. I don't under. Sometimes it does make you think that these people are deliberately trying to destroy our societies, that they're deliberately trying to put their citizens in danger, because anybody in their right mind can see that this is utterly and completely mad. You're incentivizing people who hate you. It drives me mad.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I was sitting back once I said to you, if you're a world leader for the day, what would you do? And I was just nodding and smiling. And you nailed that question. You really did. You gave a great answer. Well done, you.
Thank you.
No worries. And yeah, I'll tell you what, let's wrap this up now. Your YouTube channel, do you have a schedule when you produce content, or is it just when you feel like it? Yeah, how do you go about doing that? Is it just on a whim, or do you have a schedule?
Previous to the kind of Catalan crisis taking off, it was, say, an attempt to make 5 videos a week. So
Wow.
so generally, so generally what I would do is the evening before, kind of looking at the news, kind of going on YouTube, wandering around just to find an interesting topic. Then before I go to bed, line up lots of videos, basically make a document with video clips, articles, things that looked interesting to me, but no plans. And all my videos are completely improvised. Absolutely no plans. Then get up at this ungodly hour, like about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and all I do is look at the document and then line up in my browser all the things I'm going to use in order. And I kind of look at the screen and go through the things and try and work out a story in my head. What story do I want to tell about this? And then I switch on the recorder and tell it. And that's basically it. And then I edit out any of the bits I don't like.
Yeah.
But it's quite a quick process. And because I don't really like to be. I mean, there's some really impressive people. I've become quite good friends with the Iconoclast, for example. He does really ace videos, but I'm not very good at planning things. And in fact, when I arrived here in Barcelona as a jazz musician, and I think it kind of describes my personality. Jazz is all about preparing your material a great deal, really understanding the chords, learning the scales, really knowing what is possible in a piece of music, and then getting on stage and just going for it. And that's basically my attitude to life. I'm very studious. I like to prepare things very well, but then in the moment of truth, just do it. Just see what happens is my view of life. And up until the start of October, really, I was managing to do most of the time about 4 or 5 videos a week on that basis. But since the Catalan crisis has kicked off, then it's basically I'm making a video whenever something happens. And also what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to write a book, or trying to get all the material together to write a book about this once it's finished. Because I think this is a make or break moment in European history. Actually, it's a fascinating time we're living.
It certainly is. First of all, your jazz analogy, I really appreciate that. I think that's spot on, and it's very similar to what I do as well. I like to kind of get my head around it, know what I'm doing, and then just go in and talk. I don't like planning too much. So yeah, I really I want to say affiliate. I really relate to what you do there. Second of all, do you see this whole situation going on Catalonia in Spain at the moment? When do you see it coming to a close?
I think, well, it's very difficult to say when it's going to come to a close and whether Catalonia is going to gain independence or not. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. But I think what I think is very interesting, I think that the issue of sovereignty is important. This is the same as Brexit. People have a right to rule themselves. And I think it's shown the European Union to be just a hypocritical organisation with no basis on democracy and people's rights. They cannot be trusted in the slightest.
Mm.
And I think what could well happen is, even if Catalonia doesn't get independence, there's going to be an increase in Euroscepticism. Another thing that's really interesting, and I certainly don't hate Spain, and I kind of understand. I disagree with the Spanish point of view, but I sympathise with Spanish nationalism. I think potentially when two peoples come into conflict, as we are now, it's obviously a dangerous situation. But I admire the Spanish for their nationalism and their national pride, and it's encouraging a greater sense of national pride. And I think slowly people on the Iberian Peninsula, who, as I said before, have never been Eurosceptic, are going to start seeing through the European Union and start thinking, these people aren't really working in our best interests. And if you notice, recently there's been a referendum in northern Italy, and Lombardy and Veneto want more autonomy. There's Flanders in Belgium that wants more autonomy. There's various places around Europe that are waking up, and the European Union and Jean-Claude Juncker willing to accommodate these desires. So there has to be some kind of change, and either it'll bring the European Union down, or the European Union, if it's to continue, will have to reform massively. It'll have to reinvent itself. So I think it's very important for European politics.
Indeed, I couldn't agree more. And also, another thing that's very important too is the Spanish national team for the football. What's going to happen there?
Well, I mean, if Catalonia becomes independent, then there'll be a Catalan national team. I think more interesting, though, is what will happen to the Spanish Liga. And where will my beloved football club Barcelona end up playing? This is a really interesting question. I think we'll probably end up staying in La Liga. If we don't stay in La Liga, then we might move to the French league. Any league who's interested in its economy wants a big club like Barca in it. If Catalonia gets independence, perhaps Barca will get kicked out of the Liga. I would be concerned about that. I'm not so concerned about Catalonia having its own national team. That'd be fine.
Yeah.
Catalans always provide a large proportion of the national team anyway, so I think we'd do fine for a little country.
That's a very good point. It's a very good point. And we'll focus, hopefully you and I are going to talk again. We'll focus on the EU a little bit there, as obviously you brought it up towards the end, and there's huge things to discuss there. But what would the Liga be without Barcelona? What, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid occasionally? It would be worse than the Scottish League. So for that sake, I hope Barcelona stay within La Liga.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's good for competition, and just imagine that, the most important team in Spain and the most important team in the independent country of Catalonia are playing each other in the same league. It would still be a big grudge match, and it would still draw massive crowds. So, I want to be playing Real Madrid. It's the best. The Clásico is the best game ever.
Nice. Well, I like it how we divulged a little bit into football to finish off this conversation. But Simon, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's a pleasure, Ben. It's really been nice talking to you, and I'll be happy to talk again. Just get in touch, mate.
I certainly will. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Look after yourself.
I certainly will. You too.